Hey everyone, welcome to August 7th Profit Trader Coaching Call. We're going to get right into it. Okay, so the context of what I thought the only pretty much decent signal at this point was 2 days ago, right? Prior to that, the last week or so, when we were hitting these double tops and then we were shorting, right? So we shorted a lot of this up here because after this tail, right, we were going to be entering into a new phase of the market, especially how overextended it was. So we switched our bias to now shorting. Now, because this is for day traders, this is multiple weeks. This is significant, right? So it's not like, oh my God, everything has to always be bullish because I'm always zoomed out. No, I'm thinking in multiple time frames. So when this thing actually did break down, right, I said as this was breaking, I said it could get neutral to bullish again if it gets to a spot where even a bigger picture bias can come into place, and that's the top of this balance, where we had a big giant key reference area balance breakout spot. It also shows this larger trend line that was in check and even bigger bias, right? So when we hit that, I'm not saying you have to take that on first test. I didn't take it on first test because, there was this intermediate blast down and then there's this, so the short term and the intermediate term were down. That's time frame alignment until when? Until it can get to a big picture bias that could potentially, like it is now, reverse it again, right? And we got that reaction. The problem is that most people would start buying up here on the confirmation. They're not incorporating this concept called first test. Yes, this time frame is bigger. Yes, we got a reaction up, but now it's first test on a very important key reference area, which is this bounce breakdown spot. Just as this was a bounce breakout, this is a bounce breakdown spot. So on first test, when it comes up to this bounce breakdown spot, we're going to get a tradable reaction, and we did. Now we have something else besides just revisiting this key reference area, which is the bounce breakout spot and the trend line, is that we have a double bottom on this smaller time frame. So we have a double bottom, then we have a confluence of the trend line and the bounce breakout spot, and we have now the 50 moving average showing a trend. So we're hitting all these things, and we had a hook from extreme. So yeah, that's why I went long when it was looking scary. Now I have a quad exit in. Now as it's coming up, I don't know how strong this is going to be. That's why I've exited half off on my SUI as well as my Bitcoin trade. SUI was like around here when we said things could reverse. Because yes, up here it did go all the way down again. Yes, it did. But this time it's going down into an inverse head and shoulders pattern, which can neutralize this downtrend. Plus I'm following Bitcoin. It's very much mirroring Bitcoin, except it has a higher beta ratio. You see Ethereum's in a tricky spot because every time we've gone up here, we've gone down. We've gone down. So on first test, everyone's shorting this with a stop somewhere up behind these zones. Of course, the real all-time highs is here, but you'd be insane not to consider this a major zone. I mean, this is a triple top since March of 2024. That's huge, right? So we got a tradable reaction down. And just like Bitcoin, it's now coming into, other structures, namely that weren't there. You can see for Bitcoin, it was the top of this balance and a trend line, a lot cleaner. This is dirtier, right? But it did come into, right? This was a strong bounce breakdown spot that launched us all the way down to here. Now this is broken resistance. Let's just clean this up. This is now broken. See, I touched there and it launched us there and it acted as support and then it acted as resistance all the way down. And now it's a line in the sand that goes back many years. This is a huge area of broken resistance when it was here, when we were coming up into it. We didn't know if we were going to break it. We broke it, got the reaction down, and now this is broken resistance acting as support, a very key reference area, right? We also had a hook from extremes as well. I reloaded into Ethereum. I told everyone I would half off my portfolio here, and I'm back on my portfolio on the red here, right? And now I'm already up here. Now you might say, what if you were wrong? What am I supposed to do for a portfolio? I could just keep holding and hope it works out and eventually get that super parabolic run that everyone hopes for. But have you noticed that this market is different? This cycle is different because everyone got smarter. No one's just going to just hold blindly through resistance zones now that are major. Right. So we got that reload. SUI, we got it. Everything's kind of in sync. The other markets are bullish. I'm not 100%, whatever about what's going to happen in terms of making a prediction. Oh, this is now the final low. Now we'll break out. I don't know. All I know is that if you were just looking at the last couple weeks since early mid-July, July 11th, on a shorter time frame, and all you saw was a bounce breakdown, you would have missed now that this little tiny bounce breakdown pattern is now confronting a much larger, more powerful bounce breakout pattern. And because one was so small relative to the other, even though in absolute terms this is huge, right? For traders, it's like 2 weeks or something. That's huge. But this is like years since November 2024. So it's more than a year, or it will be a year. This is huge compared relative to that. So of course, it didn't even go sideways really. It just kind of got a reaction. It did go a little sideways, but you can see on first test, blasted up quite a bit. Then on first test, everyone here that got wrecked is getting ready to sell at break even. They do. We get a trade reaction down. But now, after the double bottom, that's why I kept the runners in, because I said my bet is on the long side. I'm not going short anymore because I said this will overpower this, and then eventually we got it after the resolution of the double bottom. So this is not easy to decipher. It's like a chess puzzle to do it on this level, and then to try to execute it is it's tough. But it's the proper way of looking at it, right? I mean, like right here, right? We broke out, right? And Amber should like just be looking at this and say, "Oh my God, we have a week-long bounce breakout pattern. That is significant," and it is. But is it if you just look at that in isolation, then you would buy there. But we don't do that, right? We're looking at everything in context. The context now is that it broke now straight line up into not just a week-long bounce breakout pattern, but the bottom of a 3-week bounce breakdown pattern. Now, this is like really the true bottom, but obviously this is why you should have some lower time frames because you might not see this on a larger time frame. Look how many times this touched. It's confluence, and then it broke down sharply. So yeah, eventually we broke it, but I mean, on first test, you think we're just going to go straight line up into it? No way. That's why I have runners on. Now I could have went farther. I even when I took half off here, I said, Matt, just keep holding this thing. I took maybe half off a little too soon, imagining what if it comes down and it gets a double bottom? But still, if you have a yellow zone, you can actually have farther targets contextually because it's a major zone. This is the zone that's the top of the balance on the daily. So you can get a bigger move. So you don't have to take off here. And even if it comes down here, your stop should still be below here. You should still be okay. Even if you get stopped out, you might want to go long again because it's around this zone. So we got that. I would have made way more money if I had better targets knowing that principle that I teach, but it was hard to watch this in real time, right? Now, so even as I'm watching this, I'm saying this will probably go back up here, but there probably will be a pullback continuation pattern because as I'm evaluating the probabilities, I'm like, well, if this a lot of things are lining up for this to be a trend day, but unlike other trend days, it kind of went in the overnight session. It went straight line up into this higher time frame zone on first test. Even though it's coming from a larger, an even larger time frame, you have to think in terms of thrusts and corrections on these smaller time frames. So it went sideways for a while, pretty much the entire trading day. This was if you didn't have a position size here or you faded this double bottom here. But I mean, this was at a time when I'm very active on the screen. This double bottom was at well, actually, this was pretty good. This was at 9:30. I could have added here, but I didn't. This one was at 1:30. I'm asleep. This one was at 12:30. I'm also asleep. And I've been getting up really early and working. I worked over the weekend. The add-on, I didn't want to take it here, and I didn't want to take it here, but I said if it gets to the VWAP and it hits this zone, So I missed it. I was taking a nap. This was at 1 o'clock. That would have been a nice add-on because if you took it at that point in time, the intraday bias and the other markets, and you have some, there is some strength here. It's not like you're buying the momentum now, but there is some sustained momentum. You could be thinking this could be a double distribution trend day. So it was tricky because I wasn't, to get in on that, you needed like a really nice little buying tail, which we got. But it's just that the fact that it is above, underneath this. But it's coming from that, which is eventually going to overpower. But the question is when, how, with the runners in for SUI and Bitcoin, I wasn't super jonesing to have to get in today, right? That's the choices. But if you were active then, that was a nice add-on to the high of the day. And that's one of the setups you can use when you miss, when you get to the screen and you're like this, don't just jump in anywhere because trend. Just say, okay, I'm pretty sure in the afternoon, especially now that it went up to a stronger zone, right, that there'll be a pullback continuation pattern. Now, technically, I avoid pullback continuation patterns when they're underneath majors, like really strong zones like this, and this would be a really strong bull bear zone. It is. But like I said, the only reason I would consider it is because it came from that, right? But you have to understand this is extended, so it's like it's this balance. No one wants to really think like this as traders. I go on YouTube, I see how other traders think. They're not like measuring zones and thinking like which one's stronger for confluence. I don't see why they wouldn't though think like this, because all markets are fractal in nature, and I'm just comparing various patterns from their fractal nature, thinking about first test, when the timing of it is, and then who will overpower who. That's why I was able to really do this very well in terms of shifting my bias from, if you look at all my pinned messages, there was a lot of short trades for a while, and now they're long. And that was a good bias switch. That was a really good, and and it started to switch when it got here, right? When it got down to this, and that requires doing your proper, contextual analysis, which is basically doing your daily call on this time frame. So you zoom out and say, oh, wow, this is really scary, but now it's on top of that. And that will most likely attract the same people that bought here are going to buy here again and defend this, right? At the same time, people that are, going to exhausted, that are going to cover. And that's how, how these little pops happen. Now, as this came up into here, I almost told you guys like, hey, this could be an inverse zero line reject. I expected some momentum down because of the first test of this. I didn't need this momentum indicator to show that. But for an inverse zero line reject, I really want to see the blue overshoot quite a bit, maybe even towards the orange. Like, see how these are really nice zero line rejects? Like this one's a classic one where the yellow didn't get over this purple line, the zero, but yet the turbo went all the way up to this 200. And notice we had a strong reversal. I didn't see that this time. I possibly was seeing this other thing called a sham move because I said this outweighs all that stuff. And you can see it kind of shammooed and then popped back up. That's the shamu one, right? I really, really wasn't given that one as much. Now you can see for SUI had, when it popped up here, a much stronger, sorry, right here. When SUI popped up here, right, there was a slight overshoot, and it still couldn't get that extreme kind of, see here, right, where it gets that overshoot. That's when you get a reversal. It still was a zero line reject, and it looked stronger than Bitcoin's, and we consequently got a bigger move. But there was this other pattern brewing, besides the possibility for a one leg count, and now up, and then a two leg count, and then it would mirror this. Because like this kind of formed like a little shoulder here, and then it broke down. This could be forming a little shoulder. But I said, this is a pattern, and it's this size, and it did do that last time, beauty principle. But now we have this thing here. This is that inverse head and shoulders. That's bullish, so it's different. It's the story of this, which got us this, is now different than this. Will it do the same? No, because we have a different thing going on. Boom. And we got that. Now, as it comes up here, I'm thinking now, will it hook here, and now we'll get the thing? Well, it's looking really good. The fact that we engulf this is really good. See how here it was like rising in agony, and it wasn't launching from this bigger picture bullish pattern, which is an inverse head and shoulders. So we have that. Clearly, just recently, Ethereum's been stronger than all these, which is great because this is like kind of a sign that we really want Ethereum to make its run now relative to Bitcoin. I might actually, that's an interesting comparison. So if you compare Bitcoin to Ethereum to SUI. At the same time, I'm also watching how my portfolio position will react here again. I might, because like in principle, when you take off half around a major resistance zone, like here or up here, you don't really want to go long and reload your portfolio around these areas because this could just go back and forth and then break down. I'm just a little bit more cautious this time, and why I'm reloading here for a lot of these is because this is now matured. There's this V recovery here, and it made sense to reload here due to the recency of the strength and where we are. And you could always just say, you know what, I have a bigger picture view. I'm gonna keep holding because I think it's gonna break out all these. That's fine. I'm not gonna sit through this. So even if I was wrong and sold here and bought here and then watched my portfolio go down here, isn't that still better than just watching it go up and down here and just take all this loss? This whole loss, I was half of the position was sidelined if I did, or down to here. So it's like if you're going to DCA, you still could use these techniques and just be a little bit more lenient with yourself. It is hard for me sometimes to put on a big portfolio position and then not have a stop. You know what I mean? But still, this is portfolio. I'm investing in Ethereum, so it is what it is. But I'm still going to use these things to de-risk. And when I did take half off here when it came up here on the stone top, I did then move the stop to break even on the portfolio. But when I reload, I don't, but I take it off, but I have a mental stop. I'm still not going to let this thing go all the way down to break even, like on my SUI position. It just doesn't make sense. We're smarter than that, right? We're not going to, when this overextended, right? There was a lot. Like, look at this, right? We had now testing this up into these upper bands, and we had a huge bearish divergence here. So that was an obvious sell signal for me rather than a breakout, right? It's like if you just looked at the last week or two, you saw a bounce breakout pattern. But if you zoomed out, you saw that it was coming into this major resistance zone, which brought us all the way down here. And this was actually first test of, if I was going to draw a zone, it would be like the top of these swing highs. And then this bounce came up here. And then somewhere there's a high volume node on this hook here, this little pullback. And then we launched all the way down here. There's a lot of people that are going to sell there to get out of that position that have been holding that for like almost a year now, or more than a year, or a little bit less than a year, but still like months. So you always have to think of like in social market terms because it'll help you imagine like, well, who's holding that position? Wouldn't I want to get out of that? I would, and you could see, that there were people that sold, but now that this big inverse head and shoulders represents, a collection of thought of people investing, of institutions, and that what that represents is that their viewpoint is changed. Whereas here, I'm using leg count primarily for a reversal pattern because all we have is just a steep up market, which is prone to climax. Here, this has been going sideways in a weird way, and now it's building structure within structure, and you get that classic bigger picture pattern that you would incorporate into your system called an inverse head and shoulders. Right? You combine that with a hook from extremes, the double bottom here. I was going long. I went long there. I went long in Bitcoin. And today is a Thursday. It's just an overall pretty healthy market aside from the ES, which is pretty overextended. But for the first time, decoupling a little bit because I've been using ES a lot to gauge the health of the markets. They're all related, real time. It looks like, oh my god, in isolation, intraday buys, alt season starting. Guys, it's nothing yet. We're still just in this nasty range. And we really haven't seen that buying frenzy yet. Maybe with the Fed lowering interest rates coming up, that'll have some type of an effect, but retail is still not back in it yet. You can see when we were up here, right, as we're forming a shoulder, the head that's upside down, the inverse, and then another shoulder, and now pulling back into these lows, we made a awesome, one of the most pronounced on the weekly I've ever seen, classic inverse, I'm sorry, just a regular zero line reject. And that's when you have that insane blue overshoot. It shows a reversal of the momentum and a resumption of the larger time frame trend. That's why it's actually a counter trend. You say, well, how is it counter trend? Well, it's counter to this trend. It's trend continuation. I'm sorry. It's counter to this little trend, but the big trend is continuing. And we got that, right? And we got the break. That also kind of portended the breakout, gave us a little clue that that momentum was legit. Now I drew this trend line ahead of time, and now it helps with overextension. Then we have the spinning top. That's what closed last week. That's an indication that we should be going down. But we didn't. We went down here. People panicked. But to show you the strength of the market, we're still holding, right? Came back up here again. When you come back up here again after the spinning top, it's also another short entry, right? And then we got this kind of like stronger little breakdown. We do not have the same obvious trend continuation now. Right? From a CCI momentum perspective, we do not have the blue now overshooting this. But what we do have is, the fact is that it's still when it's green here, that's actually suggesting buy as an isolated mechanism. Don't say green buy, red short. That's not how we do it. But just so you know, it's still above the zero line and can't really penetrate it yet. So in and of itself, that's not a bad sign. And I kind of went on lower time frames to show you that we were close enough to this balanced breakout spot where now we got a really strong reversal here. And yeah, very bullish, I have to say. What this now could look like is that we're maturing here along this. When we get to October 20th, if we follow this pattern, Bitcoin would be around 131,000 USD, which is in alignment with some gurus' predictions of what this potentially could be. I mean, how do we really know, right? You're looking at TA, you're looking at how price interacts, but we really don't know what a copycat institutional level kind of buying frenzy would look like. We don't know what that would look like. But all we can do is just use the purity of the principles to distill all the noise and the clutter, because we don't know, and things can change very quickly. You can see what that entry looked like on the 4-hour, right? That's also a key reference area here, but you don't want to have such a wide stop. I chose right due to this key swing. And touching right there. So it's basically the top of that plus that key swing. And these key reference areas interact with the daily call very well because they're based on market structure, right? So if you made like a sideways to up call, right, this was the inferior one. The first one I took was like I faded this one. I knew as I took this is basically the strength of this zone, which brought us down to here, versus this double bottom, which is basically the strength went up to here. So I'm thinking I really shouldn't be in this trade. A really patient trader would be okay with missing this and then having a resting order anywhere in the zone with a stop below it, right? But I think this little tail got me in, right? It went up here. I'm like, there's no beauty in this, right? Took half off and, right, Came down here again. Right? When you get a mediocre reaction off a zone, you got the double bottom, you don't really want to go long again. It's not at a good zone. I didn't even draw a zone. That should tell you something. And then that's when we got the drop down, right? Now it's at, because it's yellow, you can take it at the beginning of the zone. You don't have to have it at the middle to the back, right? Or on first test, you can take it. Or you can be patient, and let's say your daily call was sideways to up. You could wait for a double bottom. Right? That's enough time. It's like 30 minutes went by. So that's like a mini little bottom building here, right? Because it touched here, and then 15, 15. That's the rule. You have to have two 15-minute candles. And then instead of me, because I'm trying to take it on first test, if you're trained mostly with Corby taught us, then you would take it right here. I can take it on both because I do a hybrid. But you can see how that daily call interacts well with my zones that I draw, because I would more like have to take a little shallow, weak double bottom. Like it would have been nice if this wider double bottom occurred at my yellow zone, but it didn't. It kind of, this broke down and looked like, oh my God, we could probably break down again. But I had to remind myself the volume was low, and then this trumps it, because this is not extreme momentum, right? It's not like it's times two sustained momentum. This is times two support. So you have to like keep that in mind as your body's like kind of nervous to do things. But I gave that signal again. I even got out of it at break even out of fear, and then I gave it again, and now I'm still in it as well. And now we just got a nice blast up. But yeah, I did, it did cost me a little on the P&L, because I said to myself, what's the trade plan today if I was going to scan, because I have capital now on the side, because I have, there's only runners in. And the idea was that I was going to, because of the strength of this, I'm not just going to jump in anywhere, but I was going to wait for a really good trade location at this orange VWAP. When you have some directionality intraday, then the VWAP can become useful. And it was also even better than the VWAP itself, because market structure will always trump some type of indicator, or like a Fib ratio, which is a statistic. Once we got this into here, I'm not saying you may be a little scared to take it, but if it popped back up buying tail, that was a great buy for an add-on. Somewhere up here, you're taking half off, and now you have this one, you take another 25 off, and now just from this, you have, added on to it. Even though I took half off here, if I was up, that could have been not, I was up. Maybe I had a runner and I was a little whatever, but if you didn't, that was an okay double bottom, because it's in front enough of the zone. But obviously the easiest trade to take, because the risk reward was so awesome. I mean, this is a strong zone, and look what it's sitting on top of. It's not, I didn't draw this yellow zone just because there was a low a couple of days ago. It's because of, like I said, this is that daily thing that I showed you. So this would have psychologically, having a stop behind this was nice. The problem is that when you take half off and your stops here, it kind of fucks with your risk reward ratio, right? So maybe a better way to do it would be have a stop here, to get stopped out, have another automatic entry again with another stop here, like a 2R stop, rather than just a giant 1R stop. Possibly, I was thinking about that real time. The part of me is like, I just don't want to get whipsawed and then just take a loss on the day when this thing would just have a good odds to go back up, because this is such a strong zone. So I was okay taking a wider stop. I just, when it got up here, it was close to like 1-to-1, but that like really eroded my edge, because here was actually my original before the fear. I'm like, okay, here's a good target, right? Because this could just form a balance, right? Let's just say that we go up here, maybe this forms a balance, and instead of holding here, it would come back down here again. That's reasonable, because it's like a week or so. This is just like, unless I thought that this was going to be a pure, especially at the end of the day, this was around, well, not really, 12:30. You have to ask yourself, what's the day going to be like? Is this going to be a downtrend day that breaks this? Not on that level of volume, and the fact that this was so strong, right? And, that's just a normal variation to the downside. That's why the next day I was sideways up, but I didn't have to enter, and then we've been kind of just picking and choosing. The most important thing is that maybe I didn't re-enter well again, but I've done well as not getting stressed out shorting. Okay. Yeah, okay, that was a short. It was stronger, but I mean, look, it didn't last too long. And the real time frame is up, because that's that larger time frame bias now that's up, because it reversed. So I want to make it easier on yourself. Like one of the mistakes I made a couple of days ago on a Sunday, which really burned me out, is that even though I came off the zone, I started to short up here. I'm like, what am I doing? This is not a time to short now. I reversed off the zone. So as I'm in this, I know it was wrong. So I was like using quads really quickly to get out. And why was I getting sucked into that? Because this was a 20% volume day. This one up here, this is all lower time frame stuff, which doesn't matter as much. Shouldn't matter. But the idea was that we had a hook from extremes. We had extreme low volume. And I was like, there's no way this can be some giant, strong trend day. But then I'm thinking, wait a minute. It came off a major zone, which could flip the time frame, which definitely flipped the time frame bias from bearish to neutral, and now it could be bullish. And it could be this creep up thing, which you can have a trend day on a low volume day that creeps up on a Sunday. But because this was trending all, and this is one of the biggest moves, I shorted this. But I was like, I kind of knew I was on the wrong side because I think I took half off, and then look what happened, right? Just on the wrong side. And just a couple more like this. Like, yeah, okay, you can scalp against a trend, but why do it? Just zoom out, say, hey, go do something else. You're on the wrong side today. This was a Sunday. You shouldn't trade anyway. So I basically haven't had a day off from trading since the previous week. I've worked over to the weekend as well. But I said, okay, well, I know this is the zone. And I didn't take it on a Saturday because why didn't I take this? Because I was at dinner with my friend. And around this time, I just happened to be driving, this double bottom would have been the best trade of this day. Then I wouldn't have been tempted to short. I even said that. I said, I think you're jonesing because you had the idea right, but just the execution while you were at dinner and driving home at 8 o'clock at night when I'm usually at home around that time. And then you missed it. But at least I was like, my execution is not at the level of how I can intellectually call this yet. Because like I even said that day, I said, don't short this because you never fade against a creep. And then what did I end up doing? I shorted it anyway. It doesn't matter. It's like that's the hope. Like, write it out ahead of time because then you become aware of your unconscious habits. When you miss a move when I call it right and I miss it, I tend to then do something stupid and try to get in on the other side on some lower time frame reason. Right. But I said, okay, optimal state of mind. If it comes back down to this area again, I'm going to go long again. I'm already prepared. Bam. Right. And then we got even a nicer move off of it because what is this really? This is now a wide double bottom, which even increased the odds even more. And just how could I have done this? My entry was really great on my success journal. I just wrote that when I have a big zone, I can have bigger targets, and I could have kept my original half off target up here. But I mean, sitting through this is so psychologically hard. It is painful. If I sit there and do that, and sometimes I'm like, well, maybe I should just do something else and leave, go work out again, or go to this, go for a drive. I'm like, well, then I hope people at the screen on those days think that I'm not giving them value. Sometimes if I'm not present, that is the value, because like I was present a lot on a Friday after a short winning streak. I didn't take a loss on all these shorts I took for weeks. And I took like 5 losses on one day, even though I told people on the coaching call it's a give back Friday. And if I take 1 loss after a winning streak, I will find a stupid reason unconsciously to go in 4 times. And then I'll go back and when the performance state dwindles down, and I'll say, wait a minute, that's not what my system said. That should give you hope because like some people don't even have a framework to think about this. And I can go back and not even in hindsight say, oh, wait, this is what the system said to do on this day. I shouldn't short against a larger time frame bias on this day. Right? It's all written down. It all makes sense contextually, but then doing it even in real time. But it's like, it's okay because that, you had a big move from here that went to here. So when I got back down there again, my buy shifts, the big move is up. Sometimes zooming out can help you have your farther targets when the major zone happens. And I just had to be okay with, how do you hold for farther targets? Just be okay with being wrong on it. That's the only way because you really don't know. But as I was taking half off here, I said my original plan was just to not to watch it and just take as far of a target as you can. So that's why, Kobe came up with that NLP to help me back in the day, which I still need to use, which is set it and forget it. So if I write set it and forget it in the channel, I might have to just, say, hey, I gotta take off for a bit and not watch this stuff because you can make more money by sitting on your hands. Really, you have to watch it to scan. And then imagine if I had a target here, and then my next target was like up here, right? It's like, oh, half off. I still would have made more money than going half off, and now I have 25% left, right? Tim, how's everything going? Any questions to the floor?
Going well, thank you. Um, just a couple questions. So, could you go into maybe a more detailed approach about alt season? Like a couple weeks ago, you mentioned, ETH flipping, BTC. What else needs to happen for, a proper alt season to happen? And then, second question, usually when Bitcoin surges, XMR also goes up because people are taking profits and then just funneling it back into, XMR, saving some profits in there. Um, do you have any like historical analysis on that?
Okay, good questions. Yeah. Well, macro wise, one of the things that we have to see that's correspondent with every alt season is not just like, the proximity away from the halving event and all that kind of a thing, but it's also, what is the Fed doing? And they have to cut these interest rates. So then these institutions and people just start having more credit and more money flows in. It's cheaper. And yeah, for a while, for the people to get the free Ponzi money, it's great. And then eventually what happens is that prices rise for everyone. But initially, everyone that's invested in assets doesn't care about the rise in inflation because they get rid, their assets in something goes up. So the fact is that they just hinted that September is going to be the basis points cuts, which I think we're already getting a response to that in the market ahead of time. It's not like we got to wait for that day and then it takes off. If they announce now, like, hey, we're going to be doing such and such. Just from a timing perspective, if you look at the summer, usually the summer, late summer, a lot of these hedge fund managers and institutions are taking vacations. So there's that 2 week break, that summer doldrums, just lower volume. And we can see that on the daily when we take a look at this indicator here. It's the average true range of Bitcoin. It just basically it averages out what the highs and lows of the last whatever I put into the formula day would be. I think I put 20 in. I put 14. Okay. Put 20, whatever, just whatever it is, it's consistent. And you can just see in this summer, right? As it typically does, we've had a huge decrease in volume. Now, volume is often correlated with that phase of the market that needs to be steep up and trending, or downtrending. But if we look at what happened where we were a year ago, right? We had a very low volume June coming into August, right? Low volume, kind of like where we are. We're here. Might trickle down a little bit, but stabilizing more, right? And then I guess we didn't have a bullish September, we went even lower. But then that fourth quarter, that Santa Claus rally or Christmas tree, whatever they call it, Santa Claus rally, right? So this, yeah. I think this time, the timing of it in September, where they're lowering the interest rates, we're already seeing a response to it, even in a low volume environment. At areas that aren't great trade locations. It's not like this pattern is happening near somewhere low. This pattern is happening, near somewhere high. And you kind of need a balance like this and then a breakout attempt to break something of such a strong nature, right? As it matures, the greater the balance, the greater the odds that it breaks out. But every other time here, it really didn't balance up here. It smashed down. So the reason why I'm showing you this market context is that one of to answer your first question on top of the basis macro event lowering of the interest rates, we're going to need to see this type of behavior on this time frame. Meaning, you don't just go straight up through such a strong zone. We need to have, the potential energy of the rest to have the kinetic breakout. So this is looking good. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is that you need Ethereum to have that run, to have an alt season. Ethereum has to go nuts because the ecosystem is thriving, and all these. The problem is though is that how much capital? If you look at it, last alt season there was a small amount of projects, maybe 6,000, and now there's like 36,000. I'm actually gonna get I actually have that statistic, so I may be quoting it incorrectly. I'm gonna look. I'll publish it in the channel. But I've always said that as that product saturation, kind of like what happened with the .com. It's like everyone's doing the same thing. It's a hot thing, but who's going to come out at the end of it? The hope that a lot of people have, which is why they haven't managed the risk well, is that maybe this time we can get out of this. Like maybe everything will have a little bit of a run because now all these institutions are in on it and there's so much more capital that we'll have a run like we've never seen. That's sort of the thought. But then there's also this other thought that the new money is really obsessed with Bitcoin. But now Ethereum and some of these other things are now going to be included in ETFs and ways that 401ks and institutions and so on can have access to Ethereum. Maybe they only want Bitcoin, but if they do to Bitcoin, if they do to Ethereum what they did to Bitcoin, that could spark enough of an attraction for retail to start pumping. Because it seems like they don't want these coins, but that's okay. We don't need them to do it if we can just get them to have the Ethereum one. And so far, this is what we need: 5 and versus 1.89. I like it. SUI, liking it, going with Bitcoin, very higher beta, more volatile. But alt season is a game of which project. There's so many variables. I'll give you an example of a project that has a lot of banking ties, but it has absolutely zero publicity. And they're like, we don't need publicity because of the partnerships and the institutions that are going to be acquiring the banks that are going to be using Proton and this whole meticulous network. I cashed out right around here and bought more SUI, but then the next day or whatever, it does like a 30% move, and you're like, what the heck? It's like and what sparked me, this could be the one where I bought a huge amount at sentence level, like 15K, and you can see it's like at pennies. But I've been holding this one for 4 years, and I got out at 5, from 15 to 5, just to save some of it. And what sparked my inability to hold through a lot of this, even though it was getting good press, and you could see what it was capable of last run, was a chain reaction of LTO. Now, you could see, right, just the amount of projects claiming to do something, claiming to solve a problem is, for a while, it was only a few coins that was in this real world asset hot space. It hasn't really taken off yet. There was this whole thesis years ago from Tika that there was going to be this whole tokenization universe. Yeah, okay, but it hasn't really happened yet. But there seems to be a lot more projects claiming to do RWA, real world asset, than the need for it yet, right? And that's why you can have something that was at one point, this had United Nations connections and deals with IBM, and was about to do tokenization of land grant governments with African nations. And I was like, damn, I got to buy this. Dutch government and so on. And now look at it, right? Bad reputation from the CEO who's stepping down. So there's that firm specific risk. So even if you do have an alt season, right, it doesn't necessarily mean that your project has to take off, because this alt season might look like even last alt season. It wasn't like they all went up at the same time. Different projects had their different runs. Now, one coin that I'm excited about that I recently picked up is Ondo, right? And technically within this lower band, it's not like we're buying up here. And I'll be keeping an eye. And I haven't added too many. I don't want, and I just tell myself I'm not getting any more coins. I'm too invested in them. But I took some profits from Ethereum and SUI and a little bit, and I went into Ondo. I'll keep you updated on that. But pretty good move today, a little over 6%, and you can see the altcoin cap, right? You can see really what the potential is of where we were at. If you go back to even not, I can't go back past this, but I don't know why. Well, it's Binance, but you can see just even in 2024. I mean, you can see we just had a lot more uh, liquidity in the market. I mean, capital in the market, and you can see the alts were just dominating. At the very least, the ratio between Bitcoin and alts was much more in their favor at this stage of the game. So, but I mean, we have a lot of upside potential because really we're just flickering right now, and it's been quite a long time with that. But being early, that's the price you pay, I guess. Here's a cool chart. Let's go to the 2 week one. Another thing that I was looking at that gave me some conviction that there would be some trend continuation, even though we've had like only a shallow weekly pullback, or at least that we would just be going sideways shallow, is the fact that we have uh, the blue over the orange RSI. So you have the fast over the slow, which is an indication of a trend. Once it starts to reverse, you can see here, and this started to go sideways and this reversed. It was giving you a heads up right around here that a bigger pullback was imminent, and we got it. That was in March. In very similar concept, right? Right here on March, hitting this bounce breakout spot, huge move up, right? And similar concept here, except this is a steeper pullback and a much larger fractal. Here, pulled back, much shallower pullback. And then this is the top of that fractal, smaller than this one, but still testing the top of a bounce breakout. So what we need for an alt season to happen is we need the dominance from Ethereum to Bitcoin to shift. I did show a chart where that inverted the Ethereum to Bitcoin ratio. It's somewhere saved. I got to find it. That still should be intact, and we're starting to see some signs of that. One of the things that would help you when you see this much strength in the market is that you can say, hey, 90% of the day trends end at the last hour of the day. So that can help you on the pullbacks, right? And I'm glad it was risky because I had to take off half here because that was the right thing. But it made sense on the way we got there to possibly reload here. I reloaded back into it. We'll see what happens. And then to go into XMR. So yeah, just to recap, we need the macro events of the lowering the interest rates, the timing of how far away we are from the halving event, which this fall is that marking period. It's also in alignment with the Bitcoin time cycle chart that we have, the decode we have for October. And then we're going to need Ethereum to start continually outperforming Bitcoin, which I like when I see days like this. That's an indication of it. And the lowering of the interest rates to just get more capital allocated. But let's take a look right now at XMR, because that does usually happen. When you see XMR, it's when people are hiding profits, when Bitcoin starts to top off. I don't own any of it because I got kind of jaded with the privacy coins on Pirate. I do own some Pirate coin.
That's funny. I think we all own a little bit of pirate coin.
Yeah, I bought way too much of it, and it's worth nothing now. But you think of that was that day I bought Pirate, I bought LTO. You never know what they're going to do. But yeah, I mean, XMR is selling. It's obviously right. It seems to move counter to Bitcoin and has not resumed any strength because maybe people think the bigger picture trend is going to continue. What was your question exactly with XMR?
Yeah, so usually when it goes up, it's usually after Bitcoin has had like, a surge and people are taking profits. And like you said, usually they're just, sticking it into Monero. It's, private. It's a lot of exchanges that don't carry it. but you can purchase it with Bitcoin profits very easily. So that's what I've been noticing, like, the last year or so, is that a lot of the spikes, and you see how it's gone down. I think it's because a lot of that downward trend is because Bitcoin went down. So people have, been selling off whatever they were buying.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, like, is there any analysis we could put to that, in the future? So, hey, Bitcoin's going up, and we know Monero's coming right after it.
Well, I mean, one of the things I was thinking is that, yeah, when Bitcoin goes down, it'll go more down. And then when Bitcoin has like that insane run, people will then sell their Bitcoin and then buy Monero. So it's not like like a SUI and Bitcoin kind of always are mirroring each other a lot of the times. This is like a lagging thing because it seems that Bitcoin has been down, right? The last, week or so after these few days here. And you can see Monero, right, had that and then even more down. So it's like taking longer to, Bitcoin reverse, but then it had more to go. Bitcoin's going up, now it's just slower. So what could potentially happen is now that there is sort of this Bitcoin getting strength again, right now that it went towards this extreme key reference area, we could get some buying tomorrow. There could be a tight doji day, right? This could be the exhaustion of it because there's a hook from extremes, and then we could slowly see this start to. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow's like a sideways to up day, get maybe like a green tighter day, and we catch up because it is a little disconcerting that this is like pretty much one of the only. I mean, of course, like I said, another one. I'm not surprised that the two privacy coins, are taking longer to catch up to the reversal that Bitcoin just had a couple of days ago when I went long. So I would not, in terms of just the cycles, it's like Bitcoin moves, then Ethereum moves, and then within the altcoin universe, it's like the mid caps will go, and then it'll go into the micros, and then maybe even memes, and then privacy. Privacy is like the last thing, almost like a signal at the top tops in, because that's just when there's so much euphoria that people can't help but try to hide. They have to hide their profits because it's just getting ridiculous. But I mean, here's to more days like this. We want a lot more days like this. Hopefully, what we're seeing today is the buying of some news events that are already happening. But why one day they go up and why some don't. It just, whatever the participants' views are that day. But the general trend is that when they're all up, they're all up. When they're all down, they're all down. But yeah, this finished a lot stronger than I had anticipated. I was a little worried initially when we came up here that we were going to have a little bit of a problem. A little bit we did. It was sort of a boring. If you weren't already previously long, this was a pretty boring day in terms of the market. I mean, the overnight happened here. If you were sleeping and you were prepping, and then you were getting ready for 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, you pretty much were trading a sideways only day. Yeah, if you were here for that, you caught a nice trade. But I would much rather be in this, learning how to take better targets and not scaling too soon. I would have a higher percentage right now on this trade. But, at least SUI, I'm half off, right? And I'm not necessarily going to take another half off, which would be another 25% off uh, right here. Yes, I took half off here. No need to add risk. Hopefully we'll get a breakout because the idea is that we could get this short squeeze, right? If we broke through this up in here, but remember this now is bigger than this. So you have to watch it, how it interacts, but that's how that quad exit comes in to help us with a lot of this uncertainty. So yeah, the smaller time frame context is tricky, but it's really based on what's happening with the larger time frame. Notice that when my day trades went from more shorts to longs is also when I reloaded the portfolio because this is a potential reversal point. So, but But yeah, that's pretty much it. Tim, did that answer your questions? Do you have any more questions?
I did. No, I don't have any more right now.
Okay, how's everything going with the training? You feeling? I actually right before I was a little bit late to start the meeting because I was right with my stats guy, so I'm doing pretty good on my statistics. I mean, I was usually filling it out every single day right when I was doing it. Then a couple of days I got behind. And I said I got to get my stats guy for six. I'm like 6 or 7 trades, 8 trades behind. I got to add that in. So yeah, it definitely helps. The journal, everything. You're like, oh man, I am realizing that on the major zones I can have a way better edge if I just hold my targets to farther out.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah, so keep it up and see you guys in the room and see you tomorrow.
Right on. Thank you, Matt.
Right on. Righteous. Take care, brother. Peace.